So I'm calling to order the Curriculum Instruction Assessment and Accountability Subcommittee meeting on March 10th, 2026. This meeting is being conducted in a hybrid fashion, so we have people online as well as here in the superintendent's office. Cheryl Miller notified me by email that she is planning to record this subcommittee meeting. So as chair of the subcommittee, I am notifying everyone of Ms. Miller's intentions to record this meeting. And with that, we will get started. We're here today to get an update on the Math Pathways Task Force since our last meeting in January, and to hear about plans going forward for the spring. So with that, I will turn this over to Dr. Ford-Walker.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Great to see you. Thank you for having me here this afternoon. I just want to start off by sharing that Octavia Bronner, our Director of Math and Computer Science, is unable to join us this afternoon for today's presentation. She had an emergency and is not feeling well. So she has been co-leading this work with myself. And so I will be presenting, but please rest assured that I'll share with her feedback, questions, etc. From today's meeting. So this is an update around the Math Pathways Planning Task Force work since January. The task force has been working together since September to work on a charge that we did receive from Superintendent Holman, as well as community members. And so our work has been centered around that over the past year. And so what I'll do this afternoon is just share an update since we last met with you back in January, and then also share some next steps for the task force. So just a reminder of what that charge was. Our charge was to develop recommendations for the next steps that Arlington Public Schools needs to take in order to ensure pathways through math coursework. And we needed to do that by making sure that we provide students with opportunities to access courses that align with their learning goals, align with existing APS commitments to MTSS, challenge by choice, and building foundational knowledge and core content. And then finally, we were tasked with doing this in ways that will be sustainable and efficient enough for the system to support financially, contractually, and structurally. So that's the charge that the task force has been working under. And back in January, we did have a set of recommendations that were preliminary recommendations, and I will be sharing some recommendations that build on those recommendations from January. But just as a reminder, these were those recommendations, and also these recommendations connect to some of the recommendations that Mrs. Bronner and myself have identified, and her team have identified for the math department in general. And then also some of these recommendations are directly from the task force as well. But one of those, actually, I'll just review them. We do have a recommendation to conduct a curriculum review K through 8 beginning next year, review the scope and sequence alignment in courses grades 6 through 12 between the progression of courses specifically. Conduct learning walks similar to the learning walks that are taking place within the ELA department right now in grades K through 5. Also review assessment and data systems in place to measure student progress and outcomes, and continue to work towards strengthening our engagement efforts with families and helping families understand what pathway options are, understand what the standards for mathematical practices are, which are really important to the teaching and learning of our students in APS, and then also explain why building numeracy over memorizing facts and algorithms is and lays the foundation for a deeper understanding of higher level math. Also, some of those recommendations included support course selection processes, evaluate year 2 of the 7th grade math enrichment that is currently year 1 taking place at OMS, and evaluate year 2 of 8th grade math enrichment next year as well. I'm sorry, I should have mentioned that these are recommendations for 2026, 2027. And then also there was a recommendation to continue funding for the math support teaching position that is currently in place at OMS. And then thinking about our teacher professional learning and making sure that it's even more targeted to the needs of educators. So since we met in January, the math planning pathway task force, as we mentioned at that meeting, has worked on, or I should say within certain areas, and we established small groups, and the groups were focused on learning a little bit more about current APS pathways, looking at math options and tracking practices that other districts have in place, looking at the math experiences of our educators, of our families and caregivers, as well as our students, and then also looking at data that we currently have available in APS, and then finally looking at nationwide or national research on these different areas. So essentially what happened since we've been meeting in January, or excuse me, since our last meeting was these small groups met um, to work together in between our general math pathways planning task force meetings. And so teams met on their own and they kind of dived a little bit deeper in those 5 areas that I just shared. And small groups made recommendations based on their findings in those areas at our last meeting in March. And essentially, teams had an opportunity to hear different recommendations and then also provide feedback and clarifying questions. And then what's happening now is essentially teams made recommendations, which I will share since that meeting in March. And they received feedback. And essentially, those smaller groups are going to go through a process where they work together to see if they want to make any adjustments to the recommendations that they've made. And then when we come back together, we'll have one final share out of any recommendation changes that folks have, any implications for budget that we should be aware of, et cetera. Those will be shared further at that April meeting, which will be our last meeting of the year. And although that's our last meeting of this particular team, I do want to say that there are there are going to be even more opportunities for there to be work that is taking place in these particular areas next year. And so I'll share a little bit about that too in the recommendations. So additional recommendations that were made after the January meeting include the following. The first one is for all students to take Math 7A in 7th grade. Also to increase data collected in 7th grade to measure the need and progress, and how that data collection looks that hasn't been identified yet. We need the math department to do a little bit more planning around what that should look like and how that data would be used to make decisions. Also, I think there are a few more people who need to be around the table in terms of our coaching and teaching staff to help with really informing this and some of our school leaders as well. Track data to determine 8th grade course assignments and give 7th grade team time and resources to support this change and to track data for 8th grade class assignment. Essentially, just being really intentional about the planning time that we're giving to teachers in order to get this work done. Also, another recommendation includes collecting surveys from students, caregivers, and teachers about their experiences with math and APS. We have a draft of a survey, but right now we are in the process of reviewing those questions, having different stakeholders outside of the math planning task force take a look at those questions, because as we know, surveying is a whole, I would say, process. We need to be intentional about the type of questions that we're asking and why. And so there was a recommendation to look at the questions that we have currently and to maybe give those questions to a smaller group of people first to see if the question is generating the data that we want to get. And so essentially go through a little bit more of a longer process to make sure that those questions are structured in a way to get the data that we need. And so that's our recommendation at this current moment. We haven't gone to the next iteration of that besides having the draft of the survey questions and then kind of going through our own internal process of clarifying and changing. But the next step of that is to move outside of the Math Pathways Task Force team to have more folks look at those questions. We've decided to generate link, one link for the survey so that it's a little easier in terms of sharing it within the community. And then essentially how you answer the first question will direct you towards a particular pathway of questions. So if I say I'm a student, then you'll get a certain set of questions, staff member, family member, et cetera. And that's hopefully to help with ease. And then we've also talked about providing times during the school day for students to complete the survey. And our goal right now is to collect survey data, or our thinking is to collect survey data from students in 5th through 12th grades, in order to make sure that we have an elementary voice and experience. And the thinking is that 5th grade would be the grade to start with, but there's also some conversation about possibly extending it to 4th grade. But we would need to talk a little bit more about that with our school leaders and also our educators to make sure that the survey is getting the type of data that we want to help make informed decisions. In addition to that recommendation, we have a recommendation to allow all students to take a common math pathway until 11th or 12th grade. What that would actually look like would need to be decided in terms of the inequitable tracking that is taking place, or where we currently, I think, experiencing the effects of that. The goal here would be to eliminate that in order to allow this common pathway. The team still needs to do a little bit more research around different options for that. And also the team needs more planning time to identify what that could specifically look like. There is an ask or desire to continue the work beyond April, so that there is some work taking place by some team members and also the math department to more closely identify what this could look like.
Yeah. What do you mean by all students taking a common math pathway until 11th or 12th? Is that sort of defining the core differently, or is that like what's the challenge that they're seeking to change, like address there?
Well, the goal here is to make sure that all students are making sure that the options that they have for courses are not leading to spaces where we find inequity. So meaning students are either going one path or the other. And so for
no
example,
opportunity to shift together. Got it.
Right now that doesn't exist, I think, in a way that is open to all students, because if you are a student and you take a particular course, you might unintentionally end up in a particular track that is unintended.
And that's blocking your access to a certain class in 11th or 12th.
Yes.
That's what they're trying to fix.
Yeah.
Got it.
Also give all students access to math support. And there is some thinking that this offering could possibly happen during a summer program offering between 7th and 8th grade. Also, but we know that access during the summer might be different for different students, and that might limit opportunities, or it just might provide some other unintended consequences. And so that has to be planned a little bit more and thought about a little bit more in terms of offerings. Also consider heterogeneous groupings in 9th grade. Also, I think as our data has consistently shown, we are constantly working on identifying professional development for teachers that is meaningful and that is applicable and helpful. And so I think continuing to refine our offerings so that they support teachers in some of these changes is a recommendation that the team has as well. And also providing opportunities for teachers to collaborate to do some of this planning is something that the team recommends. Also, the team also recommends evaluating mechanisms of how each student is possibly assigned to a track. Right now, with the elimination of the math program that we offered, or excuse me, math bypass program, that opens up an opportunity to look at how we are assessing students and what we are assessing students for. And so Ms. Bronner's team has already started to look at different assessment options and also started to think about what we are assessing students for, particularly at the end of elementary school, and how that can help support teachers with the data that they need in order to make some instructional moves in the classroom and practices. Study the effect and impact of challenge by choice and if cultural biases or stereotypes affect student choices. The team was very, I would say, there was a desire to look at data in terms of choices that some of our students are making as it relates to bypassing math 6 and also, I'm sorry, math bypass 6. Looking at that and figuring out who was making the choice to do that, and maybe unpacking a little bit about why they were doing that, and then thinking about what the offerings are that we can have as a district that still help students who, for example, made that choice because they wanted to experience more challenge. And so the goal here is to continue to look at the impact of what does it mean to have a challenge by choice offering or offerings, and how and if biases and stereotypes somehow are making their way into who is selecting to participate in challenge by choice. The measure in which we do that right now isn't identified. I mean, we don't know how, but there is a desire and I would say, a very clear articulation of the need to do that so that we don't continue to perpetuate some of the biases that have existed in the past. Also, in grades where there are no advanced math options or tracks, which is currently 6th grade, provide students with level challenges for all students. And that connects to some of the work that's currently taking place at Gibbs, with some of the revamping that's taking place around the WIN block. And I'll get to that in another slide. I'll talk a little bit more about what's taking place at Gibbs. So consider no tracking through at least middle school with an examination of the option of algebra for all in 8th grade. So looking at what that could possibly look like. There are a few districts, I believe, locally who are moving in that direction as well, but their language may not necessarily be the same in terms of saying algebra for all, or but the thought or the approach is similar. So the team needs to do a little bit more research and digging into what that could actually look like. But there is a desire to consider that. If detracking is adopted with an APS, provide supports for teachers and leaders, including professional development, planning time, and curriculum. So high quality instructional materials. And this kind of goes back to what I mentioned before in terms of doing a curriculum review at K through 5, and also continuing the work that started at 6th to 8th grade with curriculum. Finally, there was a recommendation back in January to look at how we are sharing information with families and communicating that, and just informing families about options and choices. And so Audison has hosted 2 information sessions since January, one in person for rising 7th grade families. It gave families an opportunity to complete a math task and to experience math from their 7th graders' perspective that they kind of experience every single day. And then finally, there was a virtual math information session, which provided information for 7th grade math options. And so the students who are currently 6th graders at Gibbs were invited to participate in that. And the team shared with families what the math choices are, but also shared criteria that they can consider when making choices in terms of how their child may sign up for a course or not. And so the team received feedback around those sessions, and they seem to have been helpful. So our goal is to continue to expand on those offerings to families in order to make sure that communication is clear, but families know exactly what the options are and how a particular course or experience may have an impact on future choices for a child. And so we've tried to bridge that gap a little bit through these sessions, and we'll continue to work towards that. And finally, going back to Gibbs for a moment, the Gibbs team, the community has been working together with curriculum directors and educators to really think about the WIN block and think about the offerings that are taking place during the WIN block. And so currently, in all of the core content areas, there is an enrichment block that is being created and being crafted, as well as a skills block. And so the idea is that a student would work jointly with classroom teacher, parent or guardian, and leadership to identify which block they'd like to participate in. And there are different criteria that's listed there as well that a student can review in order to help them make that determination. I'm sorry, not determination, help them share which block they'd like to participate in. And then ultimately the Gibbs team will make the determination based on that criteria, based on how students have performed, based on teacher recommendation and family desire. I believe from my understanding that it will be on a quarter basis, and students have an opportunity to experience 4 different offerings per year based on that criteria that I shared. So next steps, the team will be meeting in April. As I mentioned, the team will be reviewing some of the feedback that they received at the March meeting, making any final adjustments to the recommendations that I've shared today and also from January. And then just thinking through what the path is forward. As I mentioned before, there is a desire from some team members to continue the work. We have to think about what that would look like. It may not necessarily be a math pathways planning task force team in its iteration continuing this work, but there might be a subset of folks who are different stakeholders who continue to think about some of this work and along with the math department. And so we need to continue to think about what that could possibly look like. Yeah, and that's it. Any questions?
I'll defer to the subcommittee members. Glenn?
Sure. I guess first background. So how is math support handled currently at the 6th grade at Gibbs, if at all?
When you say math support, do you mean a student who needs additional math support?
Correct.
I believe it's by teacher recommendation only,
Or if it's on the IEP.
or IEP.
So
And
if
it's a 2-block Len that's like opposite non-LC core class, which would be a 4 period and a 4-day rotation.
So similar to Addison.
Yes.
Pretty much. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So is there a recommendation to detrack 7th grade? Is that something that's coming for the committee, or what's the status there?
So
For next
I
year?
will say, yeah, I
Not
will.
for next year.
I will say yes, but not for next year. I would say the recommendation is to consider detracking, and so there needs to be more conversation around what the implications are of that, and then what a possible process could be for that.
Because the recommendation is the up to 7A, that becoming the core, the 7A class. Yeah.
Okay. So
Which the majority of the kids are taking right now.
right. I'm just trying to clarify what's currently before us and timing. So nothing's changing for next year.
Just 6th grade, right?
Yes, just 6th grade.
Right.
I think that
Can you, because I think you talked about that in January, but can you remind us about, because the bypass test was eliminated, so can you remind us what 6th graders in 26, 27 are going to do?
Sure. And in 26, 27, all students would have access to either an enrichment or skills block, which was formerly known as WIN. And there's criteria that they should consider for either one of those blocks. And that decision or the recommendation will be made by the teacher, and then there will be an opportunity for caregiver family input. And then ultimately the decision will be made by the Gibbs leadership team. That is still being kind of ironed out, but that's the general structure I would say that one could expect.
So next year in sixth grade, all sixth graders are taking math 6.
Is it 6 or are they looking at the 6A curriculum?
As of right now, we're looking at 6A.
Okay. So as of right now, I just saw all sixth graders in the 26, 27 school year are taking math 6A.
Yes,
Okay. And then this enrichment or skills, which is sort of like a
enrichment or skills.
skill, depending on whether they need an extension
Yes,
or support.
yes.
Sorry, go ahead, Len.
Great. Was there a separate math 6? I didn't think there was.
There are 2 curricula in Desmos,
Mhm.
2 curricular resources, right? One is 6, one is 6A, which is more content
Sure.
than 6.
And also, right now, the math department is working on identifying a lesson, a unit from 7th grade that they could possibly teach in 6. Because there's a chunk of time at the end of the year that the team is working on making uh, more meaningful for students at the end of the year. And so they're looking at how they can possibly incorporate that content so that it will provide in 7th grade an opportunity for the team to go a little bit deeper in some more challenging content area.
Okay, great. But right now, the sixth graders who are not in skip math are heterogeneous, right?
Yes. Because they're all in math 6.
They're all math 6, I guess.
Yeah. The
Wait,
when you were
wait.
saying math, shifting them to
Yes.
6A, it sounded like we were choosing between the two. And currently we have math 6.
No,
We're making the curriculum of math 6 a little bit more challenging, but we're not changing what we're doing as far as grouping students except for eliminating the bypass.
Correct.
yes.
Okay, thanks. And I'm sorry I missed the January meeting, but in the slides under, algebra for all, you had a few questions. One was, what does the research say? What have other districts done? And we didn't really get much a result of those questions. So are you saying you still need to address those questions or where are you on
No,
that?
I can give you access to each one of the focus area or the planning group. The planning groups that we formed because we had a larger group for the pathways task force group, and then we split off into smaller groups. And so each group has a planning document, which has resources and some answers to a lot of these questions. But I did not include those in this presentation, but I can give the committee access. There's no problem with that if you'd like it.
Yeah, I
Or I
mean, the
can,
research that I've seen is very mixed on algebra for all. It has a lot of downsides as well as upsides. So I'm just wondering where the drive is to, continuing to study that particular solution. I know language-wise, I think you're probably also talking about incorporating algebra into regular math rather than having it entirely be a separate course. And so maybe that's part of the issue here. But I'm just curious about algebra for all in the 8th grade as being something that it's worth spending much time looking at because I'm not convinced that it is.
I know that the research that the team, some of the research that I've seen on this is, it says it's mixed in part because it's difficult to resource well
Mhm.
and it's difficult to support well for any students who need it at a different pace. Where that is corrected for, where the tiered supports are available, where a strong MTSS is in place, the results have been more positive. So I think some of the inquiry is coming from a space of, we know that there are districts nearby that are doing this. The reason the districts nearby are doing this is because that they're finding that the vast majority of their kids are in Algebra 1. That's true for us too in 8th grade. And if that's the case, then it's kind of becoming core. It's becoming the main pathway that students are on, and we haven't adjusted our systems and our supports for kids to be able to access that. So we're finding that students want it, or families do, or something's going on that's shifting the pathway that they are in. Some of what is shifting that is the fact that we opened up challenge by choice, which I think the team is trying to prepare for. The other piece of it is, like, when you have mixed research, why is it mixed? Do we have opportunities to support it well? As school districts have gone to this because it is so difficult at middle school to maintain a middle school model and to provide leveling and to provide it in a way that's flexible and doesn't lock kids in to a particular academic identity or conception of who they are in math. So I know that, like, I've heard that discussion amongst folks is like, if they've said, if we're going to do this, we should make sure it's supported because that's what the research says is necessary. I don't know if further discussion around that happened, but the one meeting I was at before the last one was.
Yeah, I'd be
It
curious
hasn't.
about hearing more about the districts that are doing it in the 8th grade. Again, the successful ones that I saw were in the 9th grade and not in the 8th grade. So I'd like to see more about that, but I don't want to monopolize time. The other issue I have with some of this discussion is you mentioned the summer program being an option. You can see at our existing summer program and the attendance at that's an extremely challenging time for many families. To even consider that as being a core piece of our support model, I think is problematic. You did mention that, but I'm surprised to still see it there as being a consideration.
Yeah, I wouldn't say core piece. I would just say it's being thought of as an option. And yes, I heard loud and clearly the concern that sharing summer program options brought, and I understand that. And I think that it not being the core, but a option could be reasonable for some families. But again, I think in our survey, we can be mindful about maybe collecting that data and see who would possibly, if it works for a core group of people, and when I say core, I mean numbers wise, if it works for people and still offer it as an option, but not the only option. But I understand you.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'd sort of like to get a sense of the discussion that is leading to the heterogeneous 9th grade at the high school. I think that we're probably going a little too far, too fast to include that in this report and as a consideration at this point, because I think that we need to have a successful Algebra 1 for all model first before we start going in that direction.
So that was a good question that the team spent not a great deal of time on, but it was noted that this would not be something that we would recommend moving towards anytime soon. And I want to highlight one of the words that was there along with that recommendation, and that's consider. The recommendation would be to have a team to consider what the possibilities are for that and also what makes sense in terms of a timeline. And so I don't think that this is something that would happen within the next couple of years, but getting a group together to think about this a little bit more deeply is the recommendation.
I have no problem with that, but I think that in terms of reporting out, every time we've talked about the English heterogeneous grouping and other departments that are considering it, I mean, I know that science wants to go there. is that we have said specifically we're doing English. We might do science, but we don't really talk about that very much. To pop math into the discussion right now in any form, in a public forum, um, I think is problematic. I think that it's worthwhile to study a whole host of things, and then that can be something we study that if Algebra 1 for All is successful in 8th grade, what are we going to do in 9th grade? But given the nature of the terminology and the reaction in the district, I think we have to be very careful about how we word this in any kind of a public presentation.
Anything else, Bob?
Yeah, the other thing is when I'm looking at the challenge by choice document that was put out, I think that's exactly what we're looking for, and or at least exactly what I'm looking for. I think it makes tremendous sense and is consistent with district practice and policy. Um, and I'm very supportive of that. And I do not have an opinion because I haven't researched it or about which assessments you're using. So that, yeah, for a local assessment, if we have multiple assessments, that's even better if we're really confident in the scores that we're gaining with our current assessment. That's a good benchmark and a starting point. But um, I think that the structure of this is exactly what I'd be looking for, and I think that parents would be well served by having this as a rubric for making decisions.
What's that?
Thank you.
Mhm.
Okay. So I guess my concerns are sort of like the pace. How many task force meetings have you had?
We have had 4, 5 in April.
Yeah,
And subcommittee meetings.
Yes, in between.
yeah, I guess that's some of the things that are here are big ideas and big shifts, and I'm concerned that sort of 5 meetings of a task force. I understand a lot of them are sort of like look into more, but I guess I'm worried because I think that by eliminating the 6th grade bypass, like we've put our
6 meetings, and
Okay.
we will have 7 in April.
okay. We've basically like forced we have to do something different because now 6th graders are all taking 6A. Oh, I mean, I guess we don't, right? I mean, they could go to 7 or 7A, which is what's happening now. But I don't know. I'm worried that there hasn't been enough conversation among the task force. Maybe it becomes within school with math educators having more. I don't know. I'm
The only change for next year, and I think one thing we could adjust about kind of how we present it if we took it to the full committee, would be to make this really clear, because a lot of this has to move through the system. So by the time it's getting to 7, 8, like we've had another year of looking at what we're doing, what's working, whether we keep it status quo or make a change for the following year for the next grade up. So the 6th grade is the only grade right now where we see any sort of curricular or structural shift next year. And any of those curricular or structural shifts are not dramatic curricularly or structurally, in that we have a win block. They're piloting some of that, like extend that choice-based work. They're working on the win block now. They've made some adjustments to what they're doing. The curriculum is the same curriculum. It's a version of that same curriculum with a slightly different unit pacing. So the teachers aren't learning a new
No, I
resource,
understand
right?
that, but that means in 27, 28, the rising seventh graders are forced in, like,
Maybe.
potentially, right. And I don't know, I mean, I don't know when next year the decision needs to be made, but I guess it feels rushed to me. But maybe by next January, when you're here coming, like, then the fall, someone has done more work. I guess it's hard for me to say there were seven task force meetings with some subcommittees, and we have these like big potential recommendations about algebra for all and heterogeneous ninth grade, which I think is what Paul is saying too, right? Like putting this out there now feels a little premature to me. The other question I have is about K to 5. Is there a plan to review that?
To review what? I'm sorry.
To do a review of K to 5?
Yes, so that's the recommendation, and also that is a goal that Mrs. Bronner has to start a process for doing a curriculum review K to 5.
Is it not in the slides?
Which
I thought it was.
It is.
It is?
Mhm.
Okay.
Is it?
Is it?
Yeah, I saw it. I saw it.
Okay,
Okay.
but that hasn't happened yet.
No, the recommendation is for this to happen next year.
Next year.
Yeah.
Okay.
And just to maybe talk to your first point, I think the team tried to word the recommendations not as
Change recommendations. Yeah.
what'd you say?
As change recommendations. They're not, let's do this now.
Yes,
Yeah.
because the team also recognizes that we didn't have enough time to dive deeply into each one of these areas. And the framing was, I think, intentional in terms of saying that there should be considerations, and maybe the intentionality maybe is coming across as decisions that the district should make, but that's not the intent. It's about continuing the conversation with some group of people to explore the possibilities. That was the intent, but it might not be coming across that way.
Yeah, no, I think, yeah, I guess maybe reframing it in that way to say, like, these are the things we're going to explore, and who's a part of that exploration, right? Because, like, that was a big piece of this task force. There were very few actual class. I know they didn't apply, like, I understand that. But they should be a part of that conversation. So if these need to move to Wednesday early release, or times when educators can be a part of that, but yeah, that's another, just a concern I have if they happen. So just my feedback. You can, I'm one person. So just in terms of sort of moving forward, so there's a plan to make sort of a presentation from this task force to the full committee in May.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay. And at that time, so just based on what Paul asked also, like, it's really just an update. This is the task force. It did this work this year. Here's similar to this, essentially.
Yes. Yeah. Not a final list of recommendations.
And not recommendations that we would be asked to vote on.
No.
Okay. Does that, Paul and Len, do you have anything to add after that?
No, I just on the seventh grade changes, right? If that's the recommendation, then I think you would want to move forward with it in May, so you'd have a year to plan for that. But if it's not ready yet, then it's not ready. But you still would want to come back to us in the fall so that you can plan the implementation for that change.
Are you referring to all students taking Math 7A in 7th grade?
If that's what this task force is recommending.
Got it.
And so just
We
Len, so
might not be ready to make that particular
Yeah.
recommendation in May. Yeah,
I would not recommend that we recommend
okay,
anything beyond grade 6
okay,
as
sure.
substantive structural changes for next year to the core pathway. So like if we do an adjustment to, we already have done some adjustments to high school to correct for honors credit levels, like that's a little bit different. But, and I think we're getting a little hung up on the word recommend too, folks, because that's like not,
Yeah.
like we're using it a lot here.
Eh.
We don't have solid like changes for next year besides to 6th, because we're not doing this, the bypass. And so the recommendations we will have will be around actions to be taken around curriculum at K-5, not changes yet, but review of resources, and then grade 6. And then if we're feeling ready to talk about 7th in May, great, but I doubt it. And I think you might want to, the way you might want to frame some of what could come next could be like the committee's going to recommend either a new committee or different groups to research these things.
That's I think,
Yeah.
yes, like it
The
needs,
challenge we're having with the task force model is that when staff are available, families aren't. When families are available, staff aren't. And I know people want to participate in this, like folks feel strongly about it.
Mm.
And that's going to be a challenge kind of no matter what we do. But you named a lot of mechanisms for folks to weigh in. And I just want to thank the committee for being really straightforward about all the things they're thinking about, because it's a comprehensive and very challenging question of, how do we sequence this so that it's equitably accessible to all kids? And all the questions they're raising are things that I know other districts have thought about. And I know, me, Mona, and Octavia have talked about at length. And so I appreciate getting it into the slides in the conversation. We'll be careful about how we use the word recommendation, I think, with the full committee.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, it says recommendation, all students take Math 7A in 7th grade. So that is misrepresenting, I guess, what's being presented. But yeah, I mean, I think definitely it's a one step at a time thing. I don't have any objection to trying everyone take Math 7A for a few years and making sure that works, and that we're able to support everyone. But we need to do that first before even considering 8th grade, right? We need to prove that we can do it in 7th grade first. So I would take, anything beyond 7th grade totally off the table from, the May meeting and any future meetings of, of this task force or future task forces. Thanks.
I certainly want to make sure that we're sketching out future directions, and I think that at some point we're going to understand whether or not our 7th grade strategy is effective, and we want to keep the students in line with the course that we're sketching out right now. So I think we'd be able to get a sense by January whether or not we'd be ready to implement 8th grade changes the following September, or whether or not we don't have the capacity to do it yet. I don't want to take things off the table, but I don't want to lock ourselves into doing something either. But I definitely respect the work that's going on. I'm supportive of it, and I think that in sketching out the direction, I think we're going the right way.
all right.
Yeah, I mean,
Anything else?
my main concern is that, I mean, the fact that people are taking Math 7 and not 7A is not the key block to everybody taking algebra in the 8th grade,
Mhm.
right? It's because they're struggling and we haven't been able to lift them up to the 7A level with the current support model that we have. So, that's why I'm saying one step at a time. Let's fix 7th grade first. And if we can prove it, then let's talk about things after that.
As a former teacher, I think that we'd have a reasonable sense of how many kids are making it and how many kids are struggling and we need to change course by the time we reach mid-year. And if we're all moving forward, I think that we should acknowledge that fact and provide the services that this is a foundation for. If we can't, based on the data we're receiving about the kids, we can't. But I don't want to open the door and force us to go through it. I also don't want to close the door.
All right. Anything else on the math pathways task force? Okay. Thank you, Dr. Walker, and appreciate you stepping up for Ms. Bronner too.
Thank you.
Right. So struggling with one. Okay. Can I get a motion to approve meeting minutes from January 6th, 2026?
So moved.
Second,
All right. Roll call. Paul,
Yes.
Len,
abstain.
and I'll vote yes. Those minutes are approved, but I need to make sure I write them down. And anything, so we will be here again next Tuesday to discuss district goals, superintendent goals, and the superintendent evaluation process. Is there anything else as we round out this subcommittee cycle? Okay, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second,
All right, roll call, Paul,
Yes.
Len,
yes.
and I vote yes. This meeting is adjourned. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.